is true that giants have been found in the mounds in the Midwest.
For centuries, the Nephilim were thought to be nothing more than legends. But recent investigations have unearthed evidence that these beings may have walked the earth, and what has been discovered is far more terrifying than anyone dared to imagine. Their traces, hidden for millennia, hint at unimaginable strength, secret underground networks, and experiments that blur the line between human and something far darker. The mystery of the Nephilim is no longer just a story. It is a chilling warning, and the truth is more disturbing than we ever feared. The unearthed giants of the mounds. For centuries, travelers and settlers in the American Midwest spoke in hushed tones about the vast earthen mounds scattered across the landscape. These mounds were not ordinary hills. They rose from the earth like the echoes of forgotten rulers, and stories said that buried within them lay the remains of beings far taller than any man could imagine. In the late 1800s, reports began to emerge from Nevada that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard them. A local newspaper described a leg bone measuring 39 inches from knee to heel. Experts calculated that its owner would have stood over 12 feet tall. Another account spoke of enormous foot skeletons unearthed in similar mounds. Though newspapers eagerly reported these finds, the scientific community remained skeptical. Mainstream archaeologists argued that no verified evidence of human giants had ever been found. Skeptics dismissed the tales as exaggerations or folklore handed down through generations. Yet, the allure of the giants would not fade. Even if these skeletons were never fully confirmed, the mounds themselves whispered secrets. Clusters of dolmens and megalithic structures scattered across Europe, Asia, and the Americas hinted at a forgotten age. Some claimed these structures were not merely tombs for ordinary humans, but resting places for giant rulers who once strode across the earth with strength and authority far beyond the ordinary. The sheer size of the stones and the precision of their placement only added to the mystery. Could it be that civilizations existed long before we were taught in school? Civilizations capable of feats that defied reason? The mystery did not end in the Midwest. Far across the ocean, on remote Pacific islands, explorers stumbled upon accounts that made even the most imaginative pause. Here, the stories were not only of bones, but of living giants, remembered in oral traditions by islanders. Tales spoke of men and women so tall and strong that ordinary tools could not reach them. Their existence, if true, threatened to upend everything we thought we knew about human history. The Solomon Islands. These islands sit like emerald jewels scattered across the vast southwest Pacific, their shores kissed by turquoise waves and dense jungles that hide secrets older than memory. For centuries, the islands were home to local communities whose stories spoke of beings far taller and stronger than ordinary men. These were not gentle giants. They were described as red-haired, fierce, and possessing appetites that could not be satisfied by normal means. The legends told of enormous footprints, some 18 inches long, appearing in the sand along beaches and riverbanks. Tunnels beneath the ground suggested hidden movements, and stories of giant raids terrified villagers, leaving an imprint on their collective memory. In 1568, Spanish explorer Álvaro de Mendaña arrived in the region. His journals recorded the fearful whispers of islanders describing men of such size and carnivorous nature that the Spaniards themselves feared for their lives. Even though direct archival citations are scarce, these accounts were passed down and echoed in later writings. For those who heard them, the tales were more than myth. They were warnings of something powerful and dangerous that existed just beyond the edge of the known world. The physical evidence, though elusive, only deepened the intrigue. Locals pointed to massive footprints that disappeared into the forest floor and tunnels that seemed too narrow for ordinary humans to have created. Some spoke of houses raided, crops destroyed, and livestock carried away by these unseen giants. Modern science has largely dismissed these stories as folklore, yet the persistence of such detailed oral history raises uncomfortable questions. Could human history hold secrets that textbooks have ignored? Could isolated pockets of the world have preserved species or lineages thought extinct or impossible? And yet, the most astonishing discovery was still to come. The engineer would soon uncover something so strange that it challenged every assumption about the islands and the giants whispered about in their myths. The engineer who proved the impossible. In the early 1990s, Marius Boirion, a French aircraft engineer with a lifelong fascination for ancient mysteries, made a decision that would change the way he saw the world. He left behind the comfort of his city life and relocated to the Solomon Islands, determined to explore a question that had haunted him since childhood. Could the legends of enormous red-haired beings, whispered across generations, hold a kernel of truth? The stories spoke of creatures so tall and powerful that ordinary humans could not hope to confront them. For most scholars, they were merely myths, echoes of imagination passed down through the centuries. For Marius, they were a challenge that demanded evidence. Soon after arriving, he began recording interviews with the islanders. Their faces, weathered by sun and salt, grew serious as they described beings called the Orang Dalam. These creatures were said to reach 15 feet in height, with thick red hair and strength far beyond human capability. They lived in hidden tunnels beneath the earth, venturing above ground only to hunt or claim what they desired. Marius listened carefully, noting the consistency in their stories. Every witness, separated by time and village, described the giants in astonishingly similar detail. Intrigued, Marius set out to examine the land itself. Along remote paths and riverbanks, he observed enormous footprints, some nearly twice the size of a man's. He found vantage points built into cliff faces that could not have been created by ordinary tribes. In one hidden cave, he discovered tunnels littered with bones. Upon closer inspection, he realized the bones bore marks far larger than a human mouth or hand. The wear patterns suggested repeated feeding, perhaps ritualistic, on a scale unimaginable. Every discovery seemed to confirm what he had begun to suspect. These were not isolated myths. Something extraordinary had walked these islands. As he explored further, Marius noticed patterns that reminded him of stories from distant lands. The tunnels, the footprints, the hidden cliff dwellings, they mirrored legends of giant predatory beings in places as far apart as Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Each new piece of evidence strengthened the idea that these giants were part of a global pattern, a forgotten chapter of human or perhaps pre-human history. Marius became more than an observer. He began mapping the sites, collecting testimonies, and photographing footprints and structures too large for ordinary humans. He realized the scale and sophistication of these signs suggested a civilization capable of remarkable engineering, hunting strategies, and survival in remote environments. The Orang Dalam were not simply mythical monsters. They were a species of beings whose traces had been ignored, dismissed, or lost to time. The most startling discovery came one humid afternoon deep in the jungle. Marius uncovered evidence that hinted at connections between the Solomon Islands giants and similar giants described in ancient America. The tunnels, structural remnants, and massive bones suggested a network of giants spanning continents. A chilling thought struck him. If these beings were once part of a global civilization, what else had history hidden from mankind? The truth he was uncovering could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the past. Marius's work was far from over, and the next revelation promised to challenge not just scholars, but the imagination of anyone who dared to believe in giants. Global echoes of the giants. Stories of giants are not confined to a single land or culture. They appear across continents, echoing through time in whispers and legends that refuse to be ignored. In the heart of Nevada, the Paiute people spoke of the Sitaka, enormous red-haired beings with terrifying appetites. According to local tradition, these giants hunted humans and some artifacts, including oversized sandals and fragments of skulls, have been claimed over the years. Explorers who ventured into the Lovelock Cave region reported hearing tales that sent chills down their spines. Even if some dismissed the stories as myth, the consistency of the details across generations was striking. Thousands of miles away, in the ancient Near East, texts speak of the Anakim and the Rephaim, giants said to have once roamed the lands of Canaan. Their presence is recorded in the Bible, particularly in Numbers 13, where spies describe the enormous stature of these people. They inspired awe and fear, leaving an imprint on the stories passed down through time. These giants were said to dwell in hidden places, and their size and strength were remembered as legends of unimaginable power. The story of Goliath, the Philistine giant defeated by David, is perhaps the most famous example of these global echoes. Ancient manuscripts differ on his exact height. The Masoretic text describes him as 6 cubits and a span, roughly 9 feet, while older manuscripts suggest 4 cubits and a span, about 6 feet. Regardless of the numbers, the narrative has endured, symbolizing the power and danger of giants. Across cultures, giants share common traits. Many were red-haired, some hunted humans, and others lived in subterranean tunnels or constructed enormous structures. These recurring motifs raise compelling questions. Are these tales simply parallel myth-making, the imagination of isolated cultures trying to explain the world? Or do they point to a common truth, a hidden chapter of history that stretches across oceans and millennia? The footprints, tunnels, and legends may all be fragments of a reality that humanity has largely forgotten. Each story, whether told in Nevada, Canaan, or the Philistine territories, hints at beings that once walked among humans, shaping the myths and fears of early societies. If giants existed worldwide, the next question becomes unavoidable. Where did they come from? What force allowed them to grow so tall, so strong, and why did they vanish? Scholars struggle with these questions, often relegating them to folklore. But for those willing to follow the clues, the evidence suggests a hidden past that challenges conventional history. The most startling revelation lies not in the legends themselves, but in the possibility that a survivor from this world may still exist. Her story, if true, could overturn everything we thought we knew about giants and their place in human history. It hints at a hidden civilization, ancient and powerful, whose secrets have been carefully guarded. The woman who returned from the giants. In a quiet village on the outskirts of dense jungle, whispers circulated about a woman called Mango. Locals claimed she had vanished as a child, only to return years later in a state that defied explanation. When she reappeared, she was not quite the same. Her bones were unusually large, her skin had a strange texture, and her red hair shone unnaturally in the sunlight. Her movements and mannerisms were unlike anyone the villagers had ever seen. Some said she carried herself with a strength and awareness far beyond normal human capacity. Even stranger, she was found pregnant. The child she carried was said to exhibit advanced physical strength, far beyond that of ordinary infants. Villagers whispered that this child was no ordinary human, but part of a giant breeding experiment. Some feared that Mango had been taken not to harm her, but to ensure the survival of a mysterious bloodline. The stories suggested that the giants who had abducted her were conducting experiments, perhaps attempting to merge human traits with their own in order to resurrect their species, or continue their line in secret. Mango herself rarely spoke of what had happened. When pressed, she gave fragmented accounts describing vast underground tunnels, creatures towering above her, and rituals that seemed both frightening and strangely organized. Her recollections hinted at intelligence and planning among the giants. She described a world where time moved differently, where the ordinary rules of human life did not always apply. Her return was not just a story of survival, but a glimpse into a hidden reality that had always existed alongside human society. Skeptics caution that this tale remains anecdotal, unverified by any scientific or forensic investigation. There are no hospital records, no DNA samples, and no independent witnesses beyond the village community. Yet for those who hear the story, it resonates with the legends of giants around the world. Mango's case, whether true or myth, raises profound questions. Could giants have experimented with human-giant hybrids? Could these experiments explain the recurring legends of unusual strength, height, and red hair in ancient accounts? To understand the origin of these giants and the purpose of their experiments, we must look farther back, to the earliest written records known to humanity. There, in the oldest texts, hints emerge of beings larger than life, shaping the fate of humans in ways that are still hidden. The answers, it seems, may lie in the pages of the Bible itself. When heaven mixed with earth, long before maps were drawn or kingdoms recorded, the Bible speaks of a time when heaven and earth seemed to collide. In Genesis chapter 6, verses 1-4, it is written that the sons of God took human daughters as their wives, and from these unions came the Nephilim. The text tells us the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. The Hebrew term Nephilim is often interpreted as fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall, suggesting beings of immense power and influence. Their presence, even before the flood, hints at lineages that blurred the boundaries between the divine and human realms. Centuries later, as the Israelites scouted the lands of Canaan, they reported in Numbers 13:32-33 that the giants they saw made them feel like grasshoppers in comparison. The spies' accounts describe people of extraordinary height and strength, creating an image of a world where humans lived alongside beings far larger than themselves. These stories, passed down through generations, paint a picture of a society dominated by giants, organized, powerful, and terrifying to ordinary humans. Theological debates over the Nephilim continue to this day. Some scholars argue that the sons of God were angels, visiting the human world with intentions that remain mysterious. Others claim they were descendants of Seth, the righteous line of Adam, who intermarried with humans in a way that produced extraordinary offspring. The term Nephilim appears only a few times in Scripture, and its meaning is debated, leaving room for speculation and wonder. Yet whether divine, semi-divine, or simply mythologized humans, the stories suggest more than mere imagination. They imply the existence of beings with capabilities far beyond ordinary human limits, whose legacy may have lingered long after the flood. The imagery of these giants is striking. Their size, their power, and the fear they inspired reflect a world where the ordinary human order was disrupted. Even if we cannot reconstruct their exact anatomy, the consistent accounts across texts suggest a society that was real to those who lived in its shadow. These ancient records connect with other legends around the world, from the giant tunnels in the Solomon Islands to the red-haired Sitaka of Nevada, suggesting that stories of giants were more than isolated myths. In modern times, when armies ventured into remote jungles and isolated islands, they encountered traces of these giants in ways that stunned historians and soldiers alike. Some reported fighting alongside beings of extraordinary size and strength, only to watch them vanish into hidden tunnels and underground strongholds, leaving humanity to wonder whether the Nephilim and their descendants had truly survived into the modern age. The Underground War, and the final truth. During the chaos of World War II, soldiers fought battles that would later become legendary. On the island of Guadalcanal, both US and Japanese troops reported strange encounters that defied explanation. Units moving through dense jungle claimed to have seen beings of unusual size, creatures far larger and stronger than any human soldier. Platoons went missing, weapons malfunctioned inexplicably, and retreating soldiers whispered about something not human that seemed to strike with precision and power. The official military records remain silent or incomplete, leaving only fragmentary testimony and rumor. Long after the war, investigations by Marius Birion and local guides added another layer to the mystery. Deep within the islands, they explored subterranean networks hidden beneath dense vegetation and volcanic rock. The tunnels and chambers they found were enormous, with tool marks suggesting careful construction on a scale beyond ordinary humans. Entire caverns appeared designed to house large beings, with vantage points, sleeping areas, and storage spaces too vast for normal tribes. The evidence hinted at organization, planning, and a culture built in secrecy beneath the Earth's surface. These discoveries forced a startling realization. The giants described in ancient texts, local legends, and remote caves may not have vanished entirely. They could have adapted, retreating underground to survive while the surface world carried on unaware. Their invisibility did not mean they were powerless. On the contrary, they could observe, influence, and even intervene in human affairs without detection. The idea of a hidden civilization of giants, once considered myth, now seemed plausible, at least in fragments and shadows. And now, the final truth begins to emerge. The giants have been observing the world above for generations, learning, surviving, and preparing. The question is no longer whether they existed, but what they might do next. Humanity may not yet be ready for the resurgence of these immense beings, whose strength, intelligence, and secrecy make them a force unlike any other. The surface world could soon discover that the giants never truly left. They have been waiting. What do you think about these giants hiding in plain sight? Could they still be among us? Share your thoughts in the comments below.